There is a particular silence that falls over a room when you change. Not the silence of peace, the silence of something being recalculated. You walk in carrying a little more certainty than you used to, and the people who know you best grow strangely quiet, as if a familiar instrument has slipped out of tune and no one wants to name it. You did nothing cruel. You raised no voice, made no announcement, demanded nothing. You simply stopped apologizing for taking up space. And yet something in the air bends, because the people who love you learn to love a specific version of you, and that version is quietly disappearing in front of them. We tell ourselves that growth is celebrated, that the people in our lives want us to flourish. But anyone who has actually begun to change knows a darker truth. Your growth is rarely experienced by others as your growth. It is experienced as a verdict on theirs. And no one taught you what to do when becoming yourself starts to feel like an act of betrayal. To understand why your growth wounds people who genuinely care about you, you have to abandon the comfortable idea that human relationships are built on who we are. Most of them are built on who we have agreed to be. Somewhere in the unspoken architecture of every friendship, every family, every long companionship, there is a contract no one ever signed and no one will ever admit to. It says, "I will remain predictable, and in exchange, you will keep loving me." You play the cautious one, the funny one, the dependable one, the one who always needs a little reassurance before deciding anything. And as long as you keep playing it, the system holds. Everyone knows their lines. Then you change, and the contract breaks without warning. You stop seeking permission. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop laughing nervously at the disrespect you used to absorb to keep the peace. And the people around you feel it before they can describe it, the way you sense a held breath in a room. Something they relied on has shifted, and they cannot point to the moment it happened. So they reach, often clumsily, to restore the old arrangement. A joke that lands a little too sharp, a worry dressed as concern, a reminder gently delivered of who you used to be. It is not malice, it is the contract trying to renew itself. Consider how much of intimacy is really just fluency. The people who have known you for years are not fluent in who you are. They are fluent in who you have been. They know which subjects make you retreat, which compliments make you deflect, exactly how much encouragement you need before you will risk an opinion. That fluency feels like closeness, and often it is mistaken for it. But it is closeness to a pattern, not to a person, and the pattern is the thing they actually love. So when the pattern dissolves, they do not experience it as your liberation. They experience it as a small bereavement. The you they were fluent in is gone, and they must learn a language they did not ask to learn, with someone they thought they already knew. Few people have the patience for that. Fewer still have the humility. And here is the part that unsettles people most. An authentic person functions like a mirror. When you stop performing, you stop offering others the flattering reflection they had grown used to. The friend who only felt capable beside your uncertainty now sees their own hesitation with nothing to hide behind. The companion who felt generous tolerating your smallness now has nothing left to be generous about. You did not hold up that mirror on purpose. You simply put down your mask, and a mirror is what remains. And mirrors become unbearable to anyone who has spent years avoiding their own reflection. They will blame the mirror. It is always easier to resent the glass than to look into it. There is a kind of discouragement that arrives wrapped so beautifully, you mistake it for love. Be realistic. Don't get your hopes too high. Don't change so fast. Are you sure you're not making a mistake? On the surface, every one of these is protection. Underneath, something far older is moving, and it rarely announces itself honestly, even to the person who feels it. Carl Jung observed that we tend to attack in others precisely what we have abandoned within ourselves. The dream a person buried years ago does not simply vanish. It becomes a wound, and wounds are territorial. When they see you reaching for the very thing they once surrendered, your reaching reopens it. This is why a quiet bitterness can settle into people who have stopped growing. You will notice it if you watch closely, a heaviness around them, a reflex to criticize anyone who still moves freely, still hopes out loud, still believes their life is unfinished. It is not that they hate you, it is that your motion exposes their stillness, and stillness is far more comfortable when everyone around you has agreed to be still as well. The person who has settled does not consciously decide to pull you back down, but your transformation forces them to choose between two intolerable thoughts: that change was always possible and they refused it, or that you are somehow betraying an unspoken loyalty by attempting what they would not. Most people faced with that choice will reach for the second. It asks nothing of them. Watch what happens to the timing of their concern. When you were struggling, when you were uncertain and small and asking for help, their worry was nowhere to be found. You could have used it then. It did not come. But the moment you begin to rise, the moment your plans grow ambitious and your voice grows steady, suddenly they are full of caution, overflowing with reasons to be careful. Ask yourself why concern arrives precisely when you start to succeed, and never when you are failing. Genuine care would have shown up in your darkness. What shows up in your light is something else, wearing care's clothing. It is the part of them that needs you to remain reachable, on the same low ground, where the comparison does not hurt. Your descent never threatened them, only your ascent does. And the body knows this before the mind will admit it, which is why the warnings feel so urgent and so strangely personal. And so the discouragement keeps arriving, sincere on its surface, envious at its root. The tragedy is that the person delivering it usually believes every word. They are not lying to you. They are lying to themselves first, and you are merely standing in the path of it. Which is why you cannot argue your way out of this. You cannot reassure someone into being glad you outgrew the cage you once shared with them. You will be tempted to try. You will want to explain yourself, to soften your growth, to make your rising small enough that it stops hurting them to watch. Do not. Every time you shrink, to spare someone the discomfort of your expansion, you teach them that your growth is negotiable, and you teach yourself that their comfort is still the price of your becoming. The kindest thing in the end is not to make yourself easier to bear. It is to keep becoming and to let them feel whatever they feel without asking them to feel less. The only thing that ends this is your willingness to keep moving anyway, while understanding, without contempt, exactly what you are watching. It would be easy to end here, to leave you comfortable, nodding, certain that you are the one growing and they are the ones too small to bear it. But that comfort is a lie, and a flattering lie is the most dangerous kind, because you never inspect it. So let me turn the mirror, not toward them, toward you. Be honest about the times you were the one who flinched, the friend who announced they were leaving a job you both complained about, going after something uncertain, and the first thing that rose in you was not joy. It was a small, cold thing you would never say aloud. Who do they think they are? You have done it too. You have met someone's growth with a tightened smile. You have offered the careful caution that was really fear in a kinder coat. You have felt, watching another person rise, the quiet accusation that you had stayed seated. Betrayal, it turns out, runs in both directions, and the mirror does not exempt the one holding it. This is the recognition that matters, because the moment you stop casting yourself as the misunderstood hero surrounded by smaller people, something honest becomes possible. You realize that the resentment you have felt from others is the same resentment you have aimed at others, and that all of it comes from the same place. Not cruelty, a grief about your own unlived life, leaking sideways onto anyone who reminds you of it. Notice the precise machinery of it, because you have run this machine yourself. When someone close to you reaches for something you abandoned, a quiet calculation begins, faster than thought. If their reaching is admirable, then your not reaching must be examined, and that examination is unbearable. So the mind performs a small mercy on itself. It finds a flaw in them instead. They are being reckless. They have changed. They think they're better than us now. Every one of those judgments is a door quietly closing on a harder question about you. The criticism was never really about their behavior. It was a way to avoid auditing your own. And the cruelty of it is how invisible it feels from the inside. You do not experience it as cowardice. You experience it as discernment, as being the reasonable one, as simply noticing what is wrong with them. That is what makes it so difficult to catch. The defense disguises itself as insight every single time. And this is the recognition that changes everything. Because the moment you stop casting yourself as the misunderstood hero surrounded by smaller people, something honest finally becomes possible. If their discouragement is grief in disguise, then yours was too, every single time you felt it. Which means the people flinching at your transformation are not your enemies. They are you, a few steps back on the same road, frightened by the same thing you were frightened by. You stop needing them to be villains. You stop needing to win the silent argument. You begin to understand that the only person you can actually release from all of this is yourself, and that you can never do it by being right about everyone else. The work was never to prove that they were small. The work was to stop being small and to forgive the smallness, theirs and your own, on the way out.
None of this begins with you.
Jung wrote that the greatest burden a child carries is the unlived life of the parents. Think about what that actually means. The dreams your mother set down before you could speak, the ambition your father folded away and called maturity. These did not disappear. They were transmitted, quietly, as caution, as the lesson that wanting too much is dangerous, that standing out invites punishment, that safety is the highest form of love a person can offer. You did not choose these fears. You absorbed them in a house that was already afraid, from people who were themselves taught to be afraid, in a line that stretches back further than anyone can remember. This is why the people closest to you are so often the most frightened by your growth. They are not only protecting themselves, they are protecting a whole inheritance of caution that you are threatening to break. When you reach for the unlived life, you are not just defying them. You are defying their parents and their parents' parents every ancestor who decided that smallness was survival. No wonder it feels like betrayal. In a sense, it is. You are betraying a contract written generations before you were born. A contract that says, we stay contained. We do not hope too loudly. We do not think too highly of ourselves. And the spirit, slowly domesticated across a lineage, learns to mistake its own cage for wisdom. And understand how this inheritance actually moves, because it is rarely spoken. No one sits a child down and teaches them to be afraid of their own size. It passes through atmosphere, through the tightening you felt in a parent when you wanted too much, through the way a certain kind of hope was met with silence at the table, through watching the adults you loved swallow their own longing and call it being sensible. A child does not need to be told that ambition is dangerous. They simply observe what happened to it in the people who raised them, and they adjust. This is why the fear feels like yours, like temperament, like simply who you are. It entered you before you had language to question it. It was installed in the years when you were learning what the world is, and so it does not feel like a belief. It feels like reality itself. To grow, then, is not merely to gain courage. It is to reach back into something that feels like bedrock and discover it was only ever a frightened decision made by someone else a long time ago. But an inheritance is not a sentence. You can receive a fear and quietly decline to pass it on. You can be the one in whom the long line finally bends toward something other than caution. This is what makes individual growth so quietly radical. When you become yourself, you are not only changing your own life, you are interrupting a transmission. You are deciding that the unlived life ends here, with you, that it will not be handed down one more time, disguised as love and called wisdom. And that decision, however gently you make it, will be felt by everyone still carrying the old weight, because your freedom asks the one question they have spent their whole lives avoiding. If he can set it down, the question goes, then why am I still holding mine? You will not say it. You will not need to. Your life will ask it for you, simply by being lived. There comes a moment, usually quiet, usually late, when the question driving your life finally changes. For years it was, will they accept me? And then, after enough disappointment, enough clarity, it becomes something far more dangerous. Can I respect myself if I keep living this way? That second question is a door that only opens one direction. Once you have asked it honestly, you cannot un-ask it. You can delay, you can pretend, but you cannot return to the version of yourself that did not know. And from that point on, you begin to see human behavior with an almost painful clarity. The masks, the small performances, the envy folded into concern. You see it everywhere, and you cannot unsee it. And here is where most people stop, mistaking the clarity for the arrival. But seeing through everyone is not freedom. It is only a sharper kind of loneliness. You can spend the rest of your life decoding people's hidden motives, recognizing every manipulation, naming every disguised resentment, and still wake up hollow. Because insight by itself does not give you anything to live for. It only clears the room. It shows you what was never real. It cannot tell you what is worth building in the space that remains. This is the quiet failure, waiting at the end of every awakening. You become unmistakably awake and entirely without direction. You learned to stop betraying yourself, and then discovered that you had no idea what self you were being faithful to. So the real work is not seeing through the people around you. It is finding something so meaningful that their discomfort and your own old hunger for their approval simply stops being the center of your life. Not because you defeated it, because you outgrew the need to. When your growth is anchored in something that genuinely matters to you, a purpose, a person, a work, a way of being you have chosen with your whole heart, then the question of whether others approve loses its grip without a fight. Their flinching becomes something you can meet with compassion instead of resentment, because you are no longer asking them for anything. Maybe that is what growth was always meant to be. Not becoming louder than the people who doubted you, not winning the silent argument, just becoming honest enough to stop abandoning yourself, and then brave enough to find a reason to keep going that was never theirs to give. Because in the end, the most free person in any room is not the one who sees through everyone. It is the one who has found something worth more than being understood. So tell me in the comments, what was the moment your own growth started to feel like a betrayal? And who was the first person who couldn't follow you there?